The scream tore through the station's upper levels like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Chen's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Around her, the night shift crew of Bastion 7 went rigid at their consoles. The sound wasn't transmitted through comms. It didn't need to be. The Valkyrie Queen's psychic shriek pierced every conscious mind within 3 decks, carrying with it a terror so primal that 2 junior technicians collapsed where they stood. Chen was already moving. Her boots hit the deck plating in measured strides, not running but not walking either. Royal Guard didn't run. Running suggested panic, and panic was contagious in a station housing 7 different species, 3 of them with collective consciousness tendencies. She touched her temple, activating the neural link. Chen to command. Valkyrie Queen in distress. Upper Residential. Responding. Commander Yates's voice came back clipped and professional. Acknowledged. Medical and diplomatic standing by. Chen, the Tsarn Empress is in adjacent quarters. Chen's jaw tightened. Of course she was. The Peace Summit had placed the 2 most powerful rulers in known space on the same station, separated by a single bulkhead. The Valkyrie fed on psychic energy, their queens capable of draining life force from thousands. The Tsarn commanded hive fleets that had glassed planets. And now one was screaming in the dark while the other's brood mind stirred in response. The lift seemed to take forever. Chen checked her sidearm by reflex, though what good a plasma pistol would do against queens who could unmake matter with thought, she didn't know. Her real weapon was the small golden medallion hanging against her chest, hidden beneath her uniform. Given to her by the Valkyrie Queen herself 3 months ago, when Chen had stood watch during an assassination attempt. A mark of trust. Of recognition. The doors opened to chaos held barely in check. Valkyrie attendants lined the corridor, their pale forms trembling, eyes gone pure black with fear. They parted silently as Chen approached. Protocol demanded she announce herself, request permission, wait for the diplomatic corps. Protocol could wait. Another scream cut through the air, weaker this time, and Chen heard something she'd never heard from a Valkyrie before: pain. She palmed the door release. The Queen's chambers were vast, designed to accommodate a being who stood 8 feet tall with wings that could span 20. Darkness filled every corner. The Valkyrie preferred it that way, their vision operating in spectrums humans couldn't see. But Chen's eyes were already adjusting, enhanced retinas sorting through shadows until she found her. Queen Suresh huddled against the far wall, wings wrapped around herself like a shroud. Her silver skin had gone dull, almost gray. When she turned her head toward Chen, her eyes, usually brilliant crimson, had faded to pink. Blood dark as ink seeped from her nose. Lieutenant. The Queen's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried layers of meaning the way Valkyrie's speech always did. Gratitude. Relief. And beneath it, something Chen had never expected to hear: fear. Chen crossed the room, her movements slow and deliberate. Your Majesty. I'm here. Simple words. A human response. But she felt the Queen's psychic presence brush against her mind, seeking anchor, seeking the strange stillness that human consciousness offered. Humans were odd among spacefaring species. Their minds didn't broadcast. They were small, quiet islands in the psychic noise of the galaxy. Sometimes that made them invisible. Sometimes it made them safe. Something in the dark, Suresh whispered. Her wings trembled. It came through the spaces between thought. It knew my name. Chen's hand moved to her weapon. Are you injured? Not physically. The Queen's breathing was labored. But it touched my mind. Showed me things. The death of my line. The consumption of my people. It was not metaphor, Lieutenant. It was promise. The lights flickered. Chen's neural link crackled with incoming transmissions, but she shut them out. Focus. Assess. Respond. Can you tell me what it looked like? It wore the face of the void itself. Suresh's eyes found Chen's, and in them was a vulnerability that could shatter treaties if the wrong people saw it. But it spoke in the tongue of the ancients. The ones who came before. The ones who seeded our worlds and then, vanished. A chill ran down Chen's spine. Every species had their myths of the ancients. Humanity called them the architects. The Tsar knew them as the first mothers. The Valkyrie named them the dream weavers. Legends varied, but every culture agreed on one thing: they were gone, and their disappearance had been violent. "You're safe now," Chen said, "and mend it. I won't let anything harm you." Suresh's laugh was bitter and weak. "You are one human, Lieutenant. Against forces that destroyed civilizations spanning galaxies." "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm one human." Chen drew her weapon, checked the charge, and positioned herself between the Queen and the door. "But I'm the one who's here." The moment stretched. Then, Suresh's presence touched Chen's mind again, gentle this time, almost wondering. "Your species is strange. You have no psychic power. No hive consciousness. No natural weapons. You should be prey." "We are prey," Chen replied. "We just decided not to act like it." Another tremor ran through the Queen. "It's coming back. I can feel it in the edges of thought, circling, waiting for me to lower my defenses." Chen's grip tightened on her weapon. "Then don't lower them. And don't face it alone. You cannot enter a psychic battle, Lieutenant. Your mind is not, no," Chen interrupted, her voice steady. "But I can stand here. I can be present. I can be the thing it doesn't expect." She met the Queen's gaze. "Your Majesty, you fed on fear and despair for centuries before your people evolved past it. You know terror intimately. So whatever this thing is, it's using your own understanding against you. But it doesn't know humans. It doesn't know what we do when something tells us we're beaten." "And what is that?" Chen smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "We get stubborn." The darkness in the corners of the room began to move. Not shadows, Chen realized. Something else. Something that existed in the space between real and thought, manifesting through the Queen's fear. It had mass but no substance, form but no definition. Looking at it made Chen's eyes water and her head pound. But she didn't look away. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "tell me about your daughter." The Queen's head turned sharply. "What?" "Your daughter. The princess. She's 7 cycles old, right? Tell me about her." "This is not the time, it's exactly the time." Chen kept her eyes on the approaching darkness. "You're afraid because it showed you her death. So tell me about her life." For a long moment, silence. Then, slowly, Suresh began to speak. Her voice was shaking, but it grew stronger with each word. She spoke of a child who could sing in 17 octaves, who had her mother's eyes and her father's laugh, who once got lost in the royal gardens because she was chasing a light moth and forgot to tell anyone where she was going. And, as she spoke, the darkness hesitated. Chen felt it then, the shift in the psychic pressure. The thing in the dark had expected terror, expected the Queen to break under visions of loss and ending. It hadn't expected this, defiance wrapped in love, fear transformed into determination. The darkness coiled, searching for another angle of attack. Chen raised her weapon, knowing it was useless but needing the gesture anyway. "Not tonight," she said to it. "Not her." The temperature dropped. Chen's breath misted in the air. Behind her, she heard the Queen stand, heard the rustle of wings unfurling. The psychic pressure in the room built like a gathering storm, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. "You dare!" Queen Suresh hissed, and her voice carried the weight of a species that had ruled the dark places of space for 10,000 years. "Enter my sanctuary? Threaten my bloodline? You dare?" The darkness recoiled. For the first time, Chen felt it hesitate, felt something like surprise emanate from its formless mass. The Queen's voice rose, each word a declaration of war. "I am Suresh, 317th of my line, keeper of the Twilight Throne, mother of millions. And I have faced extinction before." Her wings spread wide, blocking out what little light remained. "You are nothing I have not already survived." The darkness shattered. Not destroyed, Chen realized, but driven back, forced through whatever dimensional gap it had used to enter. The room flooded with light as the Queen's attendants rushed in, but Chen remained where she was, weapons still raised, until she was certain the threat had passed. Only then did she lower her arm. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Queen Suresh stood in the center of her chamber, magnificent, and terrible and alive. When she looked at Chen, her eyes had returned to their brilliant crimson. You should not have been able to stand against that. No unshielded mind should have remained conscious. Chen holstered her weapon. I didn't stand against it, Your Majesty. I stood with you. There's a difference. The Queen studied her for a long moment. Then, she extended one pale hand, claws retracted, palm up. A gesture of equals. Chen took it without hesitation. The summit must be informed, Suresh said. If the ancients are returning, if that is what this was, then every species faces the same threat. Old wars must be set aside. Agreed. Chen glanced toward the door, where she could see security forces finally arriving, diplomatic corps in tow. Though convincing the Tsar and Empress might prove difficult. The Tsar and Empress, a new voice said from the doorway, each word precisely articulated in perfect standard, is already convinced. Chen turned to see a being of chitinous armor and multifaceted eyes, flanked by warrior drones whose presence made the air hum with barely contained violence. Empress Jikar of the Zarn Collective tilted her head in what might have been curiosity, or might have been a threat assessment. I felt your distress, Queen Suresh, the Empress continued. Your psychic scream woke 3 million of my children across 7 systems. They are concerned. As they should be, Suresh replied. Her hand remained in Chen's, a silent statement. We were visited by something that should not exist. The dark between stars, Jikar said. Yes. We know it. Our ancestral memory holds records of the time before the ancients vanished. They did not leave willingly, Suresh. They fled. From something they could not defeat. The room went silent. Chen felt the weight of those words settle over everyone present. 2 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, ancient enemies bound by treaty and necessity, facing a truth that rewrote everything they thought they knew about the universe. Then we must prepare, Suresh said finally. All of us. Together. Jikar's mandibles clicked in what might have been agreement. An unprecedented alliance. The Valkyrie and the Zarn united against a common threat. Your council will resist. As will yours. Suresh's grip on Chen's hand tightened slightly. But we have examples of what cooperation can achieve. Both queens looked at Chen then, and she felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. A human. A single guard. Nothing special by any measure that mattered to galactic powers. But she had stood in the dark with a terrified queen and refused to yield. She had been the answer to a scream. Lieutenant Chen, Empress Jikar said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking to her entire collective simultaneously. Would you consent to serve as liaison between our peoples? Humans are rare in positions of such importance, but these are unprecedented times. Chen looked at Queen Suresh, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I would be honored, Empress. Though I should note that I'm terrible at politics. Suresh's laugh was unexpected and genuine. You stood against the darkness of the void with nothing but a sidearm and stubbornness, Lieutenant. I suspect you will manage. The medical teams were pushing through now, scanners and equipment in hand, diplomatic personnel already drafting emergency session agendas. The moment of quiet understanding was breaking apart under the weight of procedure and protocol. But before it did completely, Chen allowed herself one small smile. She had joined the Royal Guard to protect and serve. She had never expected to stand between queens and the return of ancient nightmares. She had never expected to matter on a scale larger than one shift, one watch, one duty rotation. But humanity had a habit of showing up in unexpected places, doing unexpected things. They were prey that refused to run. They were the answer to screams in the dark. and tonight that had been enough. Queen Suresh released Chen's hand but held her gaze. Thank you, Lieutenant, for being here. For not fleeing when any rational being would have. Your Majesty, Chen replied. Humans stopped being rational about survival a long time ago. We found it limiting. Empress Shikar's mandibles clicked again, and this time Chen was certain it was amusement. Indeed. Perhaps that is why you still exist when so many other species have fallen. The universe rewards stubbornness, it seems. Or punishes it, Suresh murmured. Time will tell which we face. Chen straightened, falling back into parade rest as more officials filled the room. Her role as confidant was ending, her role as guard returning. But something had changed. Treaties would be drafted. Alliances forged. Armies mobilized. All because one human had answered a queen's scream with presence instead of fear. The darkness would return. Chen was certain of that. Whatever had touched Queen Suresh's mind, whatever fragment of the ancient's nemesis had reached through the void, it would come again. Stronger. More prepared. But so would they. As Chen filed out with the security detail, she touched the golden medallion beneath her uniform. A mark of trust. Of recognition. Of the strange bond between a species that fed on fear and a species that had learned to weaponize hope. In the corridor outside, junior technicians were being treated for psychic shock. Diplomatic staff rushed past, already arguing about protocols and precedents. The station's AI announced an emergency summit session in 4 hours. Everything was moving, changing, adapting to a threat that had been myth until tonight. Chen found Commander Yates waiting by the lift, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant, I need a full report. Yes, sir. Though you might want to schedule additional time for this one. Yates studied her face. The queens are talking to each other. Actually talking, not just diplomatic posturing. That's your doing? No, sir. That's the doing of something that scared a Valkyrie queen badly enough to scream. I just happened to be the one who showed up. And that, Yates said quietly, is why you wear that uniform, Chen. Royal Guard doesn't protect bodies. We protect the possibility of peace. Sometimes that means standing between a queen and assassins. Sometimes it means standing between a queen and her own fear. You did the job. Chen nodded, but her mind was already moving forward. The peace summit would continue, but its focus had shifted. No longer just ending old wars. Now preventing a new one. One against an enemy that had driven the ancients themselves to flight or extinction. The lift doors opened. Yates stepped in, but Chen hesitated. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. Whatever that thing was, it knew the queen by name. It showed her specific visions of her daughter's death. That's not random. That's targeted. Personal. Yates's expression darkened. You think it's intelligent? Strategic? I think it's been watching, sir. Waiting. And the peace summit, 2 queens on 1 station, might have been too tempting a target to resist. Destroy them, you destroyed the alliance before it forms. Then, we need to ensure that doesn't happen. Yates gestured for Chen to enter the lift. Which means you just became the most important lieutenant on this station. The queens trust you. They'll listen to you. Use that. The doors closed, and the lift began its descent. Chen watched the level indicators tick by, each one taking her further from the royal quarters, but the weight of responsibility followed. She had wanted to matter. Had wanted her service to mean something beyond routine patrols and ceremonial duties. Be careful what you wish for, she thought wryly. Her neural link chimed. Incoming message, royal priority. Queen Suresh's personal seal. Chen opened it. The child asked for you. She felt her mother's fear. She needs to see that we survived. Will you come? Chen's throat tightened. The princess. 7 cycles old, sensitive to psychic disturbances, probably terrified. She typed back, of course, Your Majesty. When? Now, if you can be spared. Chen looked at Yates, who was reading something on his own Euro display. "Sir, the Queen's daughter is requesting my presence." Yates glanced up, started to say something, then stopped. Whatever he saw in Chen's expression made him nod instead. "Go. The report can wait." "But Chen? Remember that child is the future of the Valkyrie line. Everything you do around her matters." "Understood, sir." The lift reached the main deck, but Chen immediately called for redirect to the Royal Nursery levels. As it changed course, she allowed herself a moment of uncertainty. She was a soldier, not a diplomat. Not a counselor. She knew how to stand watch, how to fight, how to die if necessary. But comforting a terrified alien child? That was outside her training. Yet the Queen had asked? And Chen had promised to be there. The nursery levels were quieter than the upper chambers, designed to be soothing rather than impressive. Soft bioluminescence instead of harsh lighting. The air carried a faint scent of something like lavender, a psychic calming agent that worked on most species. Valkyrie attendants stood at intervals, but they stepped aside as Chen approached, their black eyes tracking her with what might have been gratitude. The princess's chamber was smaller than her mother's, filled with objects that Chen recognized from cultural briefings: memory crystals, teaching stones, a small pool of what looked like liquid starlight. And in the center, curled up on a cushion that floated 2 feet off the ground, was Princess Lyra. She looked like a miniature version of her mother, though her wings were still translucent with youth, veins of silver visible in the membrane. Her skin was paler, almost white, and her eyes, when they opened at Chen's approach, were violet instead of crimson. "Lieutenant Chen," Lyra said in standard, her accent perfect despite her age. "You stood with Mother." Chen knelt, bringing herself to eye level. "I did, Your Highness. I felt her terror. All of us did. The whole royal line, across all the worlds." Lyra's wings trembled. "She has never been afraid before." "Not like that. Even queens can be frightened, Princess." "It doesn't make them weak. It makes them wise enough to recognize real danger." Lyra tilted her head, a very Valkyrie gesture of consideration. "Father says fear is how prey dies. That we must consume it in others before it consumes us." "Your father is a great warrior," Chen said carefully. "But humanity learns something different. We learn that fear acknowledged is fear controlled. You were afraid too." "I felt it." The princess's eyes never left Chen's face. "But you came anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Chen considered lying, offering some noble explanation about duty and honor. But those violet eyes seemed to see through pretense. "Because your mother needed someone. And I was there. Sometimes that's enough." Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then she uncurled from her cushion and drifted down until she stood before Chen, her small hand reaching out to touch the medallion at Chen's throat. "Mother gave you this. It means you are thread-bound. Linked to our line." "I know, Your Highness. So if Mother falls, you fall. If I fall, you fall. That is what thread binding means." Lyra's voice was steady, but her hand trembled. "Why would you accept such a bond?" Chen caught the small hand gently, careful of the delicate claws. "Because some things are worth the risk, Princess. Your mother is one of them. You are one of them. Peace between our peoples is one of them. But you're just one human." "I am just one human," Chen agreed. "But I'm one human who showed up. And sometimes, Princess, that changes everything." Lyra's wings fluttered, a sign of emotional processing. Then, suddenly, she stepped forward and pressed her forehead to Chen's shoulder. The gesture was trusting, vulnerable, and it made Chen's chest tight. "Don't let the darkness take Mother," Lyra whispered. "Please." Chen wrapped her arms carefully around the small princess, mindful of the wings. "I won't. I promise." It was a promise she had no real power to keep. Against forces that had driven the ancients to extinction, what could one human guard do? But the weight of it settled over Chen anyway, accepted and binding. When Lyra finally pulled back, her eyes were brighter. "You should rest, Lieutenant. The darkness will return." Mother says so? And when it does, you must be ready. I will be, Your Highness. Good. Lyra drifted back to her cushion, her child's resilience already reasserting itself. Then I will sleep. And dream of light instead of shadows. Chen stood, bowed formally, and turned to leave. But at the doorway she paused. Princess? Your mother is the bravest being I've ever met. Fear didn't break her. It won't break either. Lyra's smile was small but real. Threadbound, she said softly. You and Mother and me? All together. All together. Chen echoed, and meant it with everything she had. The corridors were quiet as Chen made her way back to the security offices. The station's night cycle was in full effect now, most personnel either asleep or working at reduced capacity. But Chen knew that in conference rooms and private chambers across Bastion 7, the real work was beginning. War councils forming. Intelligence being analyzed. Preparations for a threat that had been legend until a queen screamed. Her neural link chimed again. Commander Yates, get some rest, Chen. You're on the day shift tomorrow. Both queens want you present during their joint session. Chen almost laughed. Rest. Right. As if she could sleep knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, something ancient and hungry was circling, waiting for another chance to strike. But she tried anyway. Found her quarters, stripped off her uniform, and lay down in the dark. Her mind wouldn't stop moving, replaying the moment she'd entered the Queen's chamber, the feel of that darkness pressing against reality, the sound of Suresh's voice breaking as she described her daughter. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to alarms blaring and red emergency lighting flooding her room. Chen was moving before conscious thought caught up, grabbing her uniform, her weapon, her duty. All personnel to battle stations, the AI announced. Unidentified breach detected in Sector 7. Royal quarters on lockdown. This is not a drill. Chen's blood went cold. Sector 7. The royal quarters. She just left there hours ago. The corridors were chaos now, personnel rushing to stations, security teams mobilizing, diplomatic staff being evacuated to secure areas. Chen fought against the flow, heading up instead of down, toward the danger instead of away. Her neural link was flooded with traffic, but one message came through on royal priority. Chen. It's inside the nursery. Help her. No signature needed. Chen knew Queen Suresh's psychic presence like her own heartbeat now. She ran. Protocol be damned. The lift was locked down, so she took the emergency stairs, her enhanced muscles burning as she climbed 12 levels at full sprint. Guards tried to stop her at the checkpoint, but she flashed her Royal Guard credentials and they stepped aside, fear clear in their expressions. The nursery level was dark. Every light had been extinguished, and the air tasted of ozone and something else. Something that existed outside normal matter, leaking through from wherever the darkness lived. Chen activated her weapon's light attachment, the beam cutting through the black. Valkyrie attendants lay unconscious along the corridor, alive but unresponsive. Drained of psychic energy, Chen realized. The darkness fed. Princess Lyra's chamber door was open. Chen approached slowly, every sense screaming danger, but moving forward anyway because a child was inside and Chen had promised. The room beyond was empty. No princess on her floating cushion. No attendants. Just darkness so thick it seemed to have weight, pressing down, making each breath harder than the last. Lyra! Chen called out. It's Lieutenant Chen. Where are you? Silence. Then, faintly, from somewhere deeper in the darkness. Help me! Chen moved toward the voice, weapon raised, light sweeping the room. She found the princess pressed against the far wall, wings wrapped around herself, eyes wide with terror. But between Chen and the child stood something that hurt to look at. The darkness given form. The void shaped into purpose. It turned what might have been a head toward Chen. No eyes, no face, but Chen felt its attention like knives against her mind. You, it said, and its voice was the sound of stars dying. You were not supposed to survive. Not supposed to matter. But you keep standing where you should not be. Chen stepped forward, placing herself between it and Lyra. Then, you don't know much about humans. Humans, the thing hissed. Meat that learn to dream. You are insects. Irrelevant. Irrelevant, Chen repeated. Right. Is that why you're here? Because an irrelevant insect scared you off earlier? The darkness rippled with what might have been anger. I was not driven off. I withdrew to study. To learn. The Valkyrie Queen surprised me with her resilience. But a child? It moved closer to Lyra, and frost formed in the air. A child will break beautifully. Through me, Chen said flatly. Through you. The thing seemed to consider this. Very well. It struck. Not physically, but psionically, a lance of pure malevolence designed to shatter consciousness. Chen felt it hit her mind like a battering ram. But human minds were small, quiet, dense. Hard to break because there was so little psychic surface to grasp. The attack slid off like water off stone. The darkness recoiled in confusion. Impossible. Not impossible. Chen gasped, her head pounding but her consciousness intact. Just human. She raised her weapon and fired. Plasma bolts tore through the darkness, burning it, making it scream. Not destroying it, but hurting it. Forcing it back. Run, Lyra! Chen shouted. Get to your mother. The princess didn't need to be told twice. She bolted past Chen, wings flaring, moving with the speed of fear and youth. The darkness tried to follow, but Chen stepped into its path again, firing continuously, her weapon burning hot in her hands. You die here, human, the thing promised. Maybe, Chen agreed. But not before you tell me what you want. What the ancients feared so badly they fled. We are what comes after, the darkness said. When civilizations grow too bright, too loud, too proud. We are the silence that follows glory. We are inevitable. Nothing's inevitable, Chen said. Everything can be fought. Then fight, the darkness invited. And learn despair. It came at her again, not with psychic force but with physical mass, condensing into something solid enough to kill. Chen dropped her weapon and drew the knife at her belt, the blade vibrating at frequencies designed to disrupt molecular bonds. She met the darkness head-on, cutting, slashing, refusing to yield ground. The thing screamed. Actual sound this time, not just psychic pressure. It was wounded. Truly wounded. By a human with a knife. What are you? It demanded, pulling back, reforming. Chen smiled through the pain, through the cold that was freezing her lungs, through the fear that threatened to overwhelm. Royal Guard. And you just threatened my charge. She attacked again, pressing the advantage, driving the darkness back toward the wall. Each cut she landed made it scream, made it lose cohesion. It was ancient and powerful and terrible, but it had underestimated the human capacity for stubborn violence. The chamber doors burst open. Queen Suresh strode through, her presence like a psychic supernova, flooding the room with power. Behind her came Empress Shikar, warrior drones spreading out, weapons charging. The darkness took one look at the assembled forces and made a choice. It collapsed inward, imploding, fleeing back through whatever dimensional crack it had used to enter. But before it vanished completely, it spoke one last time. This changes nothing. We are coming. All of you will fall. Then it was gone, leaving only frost and silence and the smell of ozone. Chen collapsed to her knees, her weapon clattering to the floor. Queen Suresh was there instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. Lieutenant. You magnificent, stubborn creature. You wounded it. Did I kill it? Chen managed. No. But you proved it can bleed. Suresh's eyes blazed with something that might have been hope. Which means it can die. Empress Shikar approached, her drones scanning the room for residual threats. My collective felt it scream across 7 systems. Whatever you did, Lieutenant Chen, hurt it badly. Chen tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Too much adrenaline leaving her system too fast. Princess Lyra. Is she safe? Safe and being attended to by her father, Suresh assured her. Thanks to you? Again. Just doing my job, Your Majesty. Your job, Suresh repeated, something like wonder in her voice. Chen, you faced a force that has ended civilizations. With a knife. Because it threatened a child who isn't even your species. Chen shrugged, or tried to. Everything hurt. She's threadbound to me. That makes her family. The two queens exchanged glances. Some communication passed between them that Chen's merely human mind couldn't follow. Then Jikar spoke. The collective has been discussing your role, Lieutenant. Both queens agree. You cannot remain simply a guard. What? Chen's head was spinning. Probably concussion. Definitely exhaustion. I don't understand. You are proof that cooperation between species isn't just possible but powerful, Suresh explained. You are the answer to the scream, Chun. The one who shows up when darkness comes. We need that. All of us need that. I'm just a lieutenant, Chen protested weakly. You were, Empress Jikar corrected. But as of this moment, by joint decree of the Valkyrie throne and the Zarn Collective, you are elevated to Sentinel. First of your kind. Guardian of the alliance that must form if we are to survive what's coming. Chen stared at them both. That's... there's no protocol for that. Then we write new protocol, Suresh said simply. The darkness is returning. The ancient's nemesis is waking. Old rules, old ranks, old divisions between species, they all mean nothing now. What matters is that when the void screams, someone answers. And you keep answering, Jikar added. With nothing but stubbornness and a knife. Chen closed her eyes. Sentinel. Guardian of the Alliance. It was too big, too much responsibility, too far beyond what she'd signed up for when she joined the Royal Guard. But then, she thought of Princess Lyra's terrified eyes, of Queen Suresh's broken voice, of the darkness promising inevitable doom. And she thought of humanity's singular talent, showing up when everyone expected them to run. She opened her eyes and looked at the two most powerful beings in known space. On one condition. They waited. I keep the knife. Queen Suresh's laugh echoed through the chamber, psychic and audible both, carrying relief and exhaustion and something that might have been joy. Sentinel Chin. I believe we have found humanity's true purpose in this galaxy. Not to lead. Not to conquer. But to be there. To answer. To stand in the dark with nothing but stubbornness and refuse to yield. It's what we're good at, Chen admitted. Then let us hope, Empress Jikar said, her voice carrying harmonics of her entire collective, that it is enough. Because the real war is just beginning. And we will need every stubborn human we can find. Chen finally managed to stand, though she swayed slightly. Medical teams were arriving now, scanners and equipment in hand. But before they could descend, she met the Queen's gazes one last time. When it comes back, and it will, I'll be ready. We all will be, Suresh promised. Together. The word hung in the air like a prayer. Together. Valkyrie and Zarn? Human and alien. Ancient enemies becoming unlikely allies in the face of something older and darker than any of them. Chen let the medical staff lead her away, but her hand never left the knife at her belt. The blade that had wounded the darkness. Proof that nothing was truly invincible. As they passed through the corridors, she saw faces watching her. Every species represented on Bastion 7, all of them aware now of what had happened. The human who stood against the void. The guard who answered a queen's scream with nothing but presence and will. News would spread. It always did. And somewhere out there, in the dark between stars, the ancient enemy would hear it too. Would know that its return had been noted, resisted, wounded. Let it know, Chen thought. Let it understand that humanity had entered the equation. Small, weak, psionically deaf humanity. Who somehow kept showing up where they didn't belong, and refusing to die when they should. The darkness had promised they would all fall. Chen had a different promise. When the void screamed, a human would answer. Every single time. Until the day there were no more humans left to stand. And even then, Chen suspected they'd find a way to be stubborn about it. Because that's what prey that refused to run did. They made the predators work for every single step.